Got a secret, can you keep it? Swear this one you'll save. Better lock it in your pocket, taking this one to the grave. If I show you, then I know you won't tell what I said. 'Cause two can keep a secret if one of them is dead. Why do you smile like you've been told a secret? Now you're telling lies 'cause you have sworn to keep it. But no one keeps a secret, no one keeps a secret. Why, when we do our darkest deeds, do we tell? They burn and our brains become a living hell. 'Cause everybody tells, everybody tells. Got a secret, can you keep it? Swear this one you'll say. Better lock it in your pocket, taking this one to the grave. If I show you, then I know you won't tell what I said. 'Cause two can keep a secret if one of them is dead.
Greetings world, we are anonymous. Donald Trump is definitely a magician. A chaos magician. Trump was the star pupil of Roy Cohen. Cohen was a master of the dark arts of politics, a practitioner of real political sorcery. Cohen taught the young Don that power isn't just about position, but about perception and the strategic use of loyalty and fear. Cohen taught Donald the art of influence, how perception is molded through reputation management and narrative control. And the fact is, these are essentially magical principles. The manipulation of a reality through symbolism and psychological influence. Trump absorbed these lessons and became an adept in the art of political and psychological warfare. Cohen had a strange obsession, frogs. And like Cohen, Trump's rise is also tied to the god of frogs, better known as Pepe the Frog. Let's be 100% clear, Pepe the Frog is not just a silly internet meme. Pepe played a major role in both of Trump's elections. Trump literally memed himself into the White House. 2016 will always be remembered, not for the election, but the many great souls we lost during the Great Meme War. And still, almost 10 years later, people are still asking, what exactly is a meme? A meme is a thought form, a psychic virus encoded in image and language. Richard Dawkins coined the term in The Selfish Gene to describe cultural units that replicate and evolve like DNA. But in the occult, that's just another way of saying a sigil, a symbol charged with emotional energy designed to replicate itself in the minds of others. Memes are simply modern-day sigils activated not through candles and chants, but through clicks, shares, and laughter. Every post is an invocation. Every reaction a charge. When millions fixate on the same symbol, especially one layered with irony, emotion, and chaos, that symbol becomes alive. It becomes a Gregory, a thought form with its own will. And that's exactly what happened with Pepe the Frog. Matt Fury first drew Pepe in Boys Club in 2005. The frog embodied carefree innocence. He was the feel-good man energy of pre-200 internet culture. But when the collective unconscious of the internet, Chang culture, image boards began remixing and recontextualizing him, Pepe became an amphibious deity born from digital chaos. Pepe became an alchemical vessel, a humongous keg in the Ogden of Hermopolis represented the liminal moment before creation, the chaotic waters are none from which light is born. Esoterically, the frog was seen as a hermetic emblem of transformation, metamorphosis and amphibious duality, existing in both the water, the unconscious lunar and emotional realm, and on land, the conscious, solar, rational realm. Suddenly, Pepe was seen as the modern-day incarnation of Kek, the Egyptian chaos god of memes. This was the birth of the cult of Kek, a form of internet chaos magic that blended irony, politics, esotericism, and collective will. The ancient Egyptian OGD were the 8 primordial deities representing the chaos before creation. Each were depicted as fro-aided and serpent-headed pairs. They symbolized the dual forces of the cosmos, darkness and light hidden and manifest. Today, these very same forces manifest as binary code, the ones and zeros of digital existence. This ancient Egyptian conception prefigured the very language of computers and the internet. It's only fitting this was the medium through which Kek has returned. The alignment is far too perfect to be mere coincidence, suggesting a recurrence of archetypes through technology. The same amphibian god that once presided over Egyptian's primordial waters now swims through the cyberspace ether encoded in memes, algorithms, and digital sigils. Even more strangely, Keek in gamer slang comes from the Korean lol. Keek keek kek. This created a synchronistic bridge between modern digital culture and the ancient god. A perfect hyperstitional feedback loop. Hyperstition is a concept that becomes real through belief and reputation. This convergent effectively turned the meme into a techno-Egyptian sigil, a spell encoded through digital consciousness. When Trump's followers began invoking Pepe, they weren't just spreading memes. They were performing a mass digital ritual. Each post was a prayer. Each kick was a chant. Each rare Pepe was a talisman of digital chaos. And it worked. Trump's rise in 2016 wasn't just political, it was magical. He became the vessel of a collective current, the avatar of chaos itself. Pepe was his familiar, the amphibious trickster spirit guiding the storm. Roy Cohn taught Donald that perception is power, that control of the narrative is control of reality. But in the internet age, perception itself becomes a living entity. Cohen's lessons evolved into chaos, magic, mimetics. Trump didn't just create and command a movement. He conjured one from the great deep. In alchemy, the frog represents the negrio or blackening phase, the descent into chaos before transmutation. Klang identified it as a stage of confronting the shadow. Thus, in esoteric ecology, amphibians are seen as psychops, threshold beings that dwell between planes. Frogs croak after rain, heralding renewal, just as Pepe appeared in times of political and psychic turbulence, heralding an archetypical storm. Remember, the storm is coming. Pepe's form is liquid. It mutates infinitely like the waters of none. This mutability itself reflects the nature of digital reality, which is in itself amphibious, both virtual and real, psychic and physical. In this sense, Pepe is the guardian of the digital threshold. The frog sitting at the edge of the unconscious web, croaking the new eon into being. But the frog has always been a creature of thresholds, neither fully of water nor land. It is the symbol of transition, transmutation, and resurrection. In the ancient Egyptians' pantheon, the amphibious symbolism was embodied in Hecate, the fro-aided goddess of fertility, magic, and rebirth. She was the midwife of the gods. Her breath was said to quicken the inner clay of the first humans. In the Book of the Dead, Heka breathed life into the nostrils of the initiate as they passed from death to eternal life, the ultimate transformation. The frog then was the sign of resurrection through chaos, life emerging from the primal waters. The consort of Hecate, who is the Greek Hecate, goddess of magic and witchcraft, is Kek, the male fro-aided god. In the Egyptian Ogdid, Kek and Ket ruled the primordial darkness before creation, the twilight before dawn. They represented the hidden powers of the unseen realm, the womb of the cosmos. When the ancient priests invoked Kek, they weren't praying for order. They were calling forth the raw current of chaos that precedes creation itself. In our modern day, occultists are invoking that same archetypical current, the frog of chaos, except this time it is digitally. Pepe became the accidental hieroglyph of the digital age, carrying the same amphibious signature as his Egyptian forebears, both in the waters of the unconscious, the collective internet psyche, and on the dry land of political manifestation. Elon Musk even picked up the Qanon current, changing his example to Qs Maximus. The current broke into the mainstream. Musk, like Trump, is an initiated chaos magician who also wields symbols to shape reality. His playful engagement with technogen meme culture can be seen as the fusion of esoteric symbolism with technocratic power. The magician merging with the machine. The meme becomes a wand. The algorithm becomes an altar. And the frog becomes an emblem of cyber occult renaissance. So we can see when Trump began retweeting memes of Pepe in 2016, it wasn't merely coincidence. It was symbolic resonance. Trump became the Frog King, the chaotic sovereign birthed from digital waters. His election wasn't won by policy. It was willed into being through mimetic sorcery, a form of mass hyperstition. In the mythology of Brothers Grimm, the Frog King is the enchanted prince who must be accepted in his ugly form before revealing his divine nature. Trump, derided by the establishment as vulgar, grotesque, and absurd, was embraced by the digital underground as their chaos king, the avatar who could break the spell of the decaying order. He who kisses the frog awakens the kingdom. And they did through endless memes, chants of geek, and digital ritual disguised as irony. When Trump entered the White House, the archetype was fulfilled. The Frog King ascended the throne. And yet, the archetype of the frog carries another message. In the book of Exodus, frogs were also the second of the 10 plagues unleashed upon Egypt. A warning to tyrants. In the esoteric reading, frogs thus represent the eruption of the unconscious when the repressed chaos of the masses spills over the established order. The plague of memes overflowing from the digital Nile became a symbolic plague upon the empire itself. Washington, D.C. was the new Egypt and the digital soldier was about to be born. Trump's victory was not just about political upheaval. It was an occult initiation of the collective psyche. The moment when irony became invocation and the internet itself became the magician's wand. But the initiation wasn't complete yet. In 2017, Qanon broke into the collective consciousness. This was the full apotheosis of the memes mystery school. This represented a major shift in the Overton window. This is the range of ideas tolerated in public discourse to make once extreme ideas much more acceptable. Q emerged from the same message boards as Kek. But where Kek invoked chaos, Q offered gnosis. Qanon transformed the collective frog consciousness into an initiatory mythos, a grand narrative of light versus darkness, revelation versus deception. It repurposed internet symbols, frogs, memes, digital breadcrumbs, drops into a living scripture. But upon closer inspection, Qanon was a textbook intelligence scope wrapped in esoteric packaging. The movement created an elaborate mythology centered on a supposed Great Awakening where hidden truths would be revealed and corrupt elites would face justice. The genius of Q was its use of cryptic posts that followers could decode called drops. A process that generated immense engagement and psychological investment. This was a gamified scope. And this wasn't an accident. It followed established patterns of cult formation and psychological manipulation. The movement generated incredibly strong gregory through several mechanisms. The constant decoding created a shared cognitive framework where followers felt they possessed a special or secret knowledge. This helped to generate the red pill mentality, the belief that they could see reality while others remained asleep. This created a powerful us versus them dynamic that strengthened the group cohesion, the group mind. The predictions and drops created an ongoing narrative that kept followers in a perpetual state of anticipation. The lack of concrete fulfillment didn't weaken the movement, but actually strengthened it through cognitive dissonance. Followers invested more energy to justify their belief. The movement clearly synchronized Christian apocalyptic imagery with conspiracy theories and political tribalism. This allowed it to tap into multiple deep psychological and spiritual currents simultaneously. In essence, Qanon was the first digital apocalypse cult. Apocalypse in the literal sense, unveiling the frog memes served as heralds of awakening. The Trust the Plane mantra functioned as a sacred formula, a chaos magic sigil binding millions into compliance. Thus, the frog truly transformed from a meme into the psychopomp of the digital age, guiding collective consciousness through the underworld of media illusion toward a promised revelation. Q promised a storm of mass arrests and Kek was literally the god who brings light after darkness. Many Qanon graphics and memes incorporated Pepe imagery directly into them. Pepe became a symbol not just of the broader alt-right, but specifically of the Q father, who saw themselves as a digital soldier fighting hidden forces, a hidden enemy. The Q phenomena essentially weaponized the same mimetic magic that had proven effective during the 2016 election, but directed it toward a more elaborate and ultimately unsustainable mythology. Khan shows how internet subcultures can spontaneously generate powerful symbolic systems that tap into deep archetypical patterns. The frog deity Kek returning through internet memes is the perfect example of how an ancient archetype finds new forms of expression in every age. This wasn't a coincidence but rather evidence that both the Pepe phenomenon and Qanon were tapping into the same underlying currents in the collective unconscious. The desire from order from chaos, the attraction to secret knowledge, and the psychological need to feel part of a heroic narrative. The very synergy between Q and Pepe demonstrates how effective symbolism and narrative can be combined to create powerful political and spiritual movements in this digital age. But this wasn't the end. In 2019, the next incarnation of the frog god was born, the Groper. The Gropers are led by Nick Fuentes. It represents a more ideological, coherent, but equally mimetically potent movement. Their adoption of the Groper frog as their mascot wasn't random. It consciously continued the frog Pepe symbolism that had proven so effective during the Trump campaigns. While Pepe was chaotic and Dionysian, the groper was Napoleon, focused, ideological, reactionary. The gropers performed a form of right-wing alchemy, refining the anarchic energies of Kekism into a quasi-religious nationalist identity. This mirrored the initiatory cycles of esoteric orders. Pepe the Fool the Chaos evolved into the Grower Discipline Order. The movement became a digital brotherhood using irony, ritualized trolling and memes as instruments of initiation and purification. But the gropers are similar to Qanon. Both are Christian Catholic-based movements who have embraced different forms of American nationalism. But the gropers explicitly reject Zionist influence and globalism in ways that most mainstream conservative movements won't. But their use of frog imagery connects them to the same archetypical currents as the wider K phenomenon, but with a more focused political agenda. While Qanon blamed the left and the deep state, the gropers placed the blame on Israel and Zionism. Both Qanon and the Groper Army demonstrate the power of what we might call digital traditionalism, using the most modern technologies to propagate what are essentially pre-modern forms of group identity and spiritual warfare. The Q movement essentially functioned as a distributed intelligence agency while followers collectively gathered information and developed narratives. This created the psychological experience of being part of something larger than themselves. A classic feature of a successful religious and political movement throughout history. The mimetic warfare employed by both these movements follows several key principles. They use simple repeatable symbols like the frog that carry deep emotional resonance. They use the creation of insider language and rituals that strengthen their group identity. They use the strategic use of ambiguity to allow for multiple interpretations and maintain engagement. They also use the cultivation of the persecution complex that actually strengthens group solidarity. The groper phenomenon emerged from the same online ecosystem that birthed Qanon, but with a more coherent ideological foundation. Both movements understand that in the digital age, politics is no longer just about policy positions, but about narrative control and symbolic warfare. They recognize that whoever controls the myths control the culture, and we can see through the effectiveness of these movements that the ancient forces represented by deities like Kek never truly disappeared. They simply found a new form of expression. The darkness and chaos that Kek represents are eternal aspects of a reality that will always seek expressions through human collective consciousness. The fact that these movements have been so successfully marginalized by the mainstream conservative establishment reveals where the real power centers lie. The attacks on these movements often focus more on their opposition to certain foreign influence than their actual policy positions. These movements represent what happens when people instinctively recognize that our political and spiritual crises are deeper than surface-level policy debates. They represent attempts to reconnect with the archetypical foundations of civilization. In an age of rootlessness and disintegration, the mimetic genie cannot be put back in the bottle. Once people discover they can influence reality through collective belief and symbolic action, they don't easily return to passive political consumption. An interesting paradox arises when one looks at the archetype of St. Patrick. Street. Patrick came to Ireland to cast out the snakes and the frog demons. Why does this matter? Because both Qanon and the Gropers claim to be Catholic or Christian movements. But the Book of Revelation 16:13 states, "And I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs come out of the molds of the dragon and out of the mouth of the beast and out of the mouth of the false prophet." Clearly this verse tells us the frog is explicitly an unclean spirit, a demonic herald of the final battle. Is Kek the demonic inversion of the frog is a symbol of resurrection instead of life from the primal waters? Does it signify deception and spiritual corruption emanating from the satanic trinity? One thing is clear, the chaos magic, the mimetic sorcery, the invocation of Kek are powerful tools, but they are not new tools. They are ancient. The Kek current is a resurgence of primordial patterns in our modern guise. The question isn't whether these forces will continue to manifest, but for what forms they will take next. In Exodus, the frog plague symbolized Yahweh's victory over the Egyptian gods, specifically Hakat. It was a war between monotheism and polytheism, order and chaos. In our time, the battle reemerges. The digital plague of frogs represents the return of suppressed pagan archetypes through the network consciousness of the internet. The symbolic descendants of Heket and Kek are reclaiming dominion in the psychic space in defiance of the modern Yahweh, the technocratic surveillance state. Thus, the mimetic frog movement from Cohen's obsession to Trump's chaos magic, from gropers to QAnon, from Keck to Musk traces the rebirth of a forgotten pantheon through digital invocation. When Matt Fury released the 2020 documentary Feels Good Man, it unintentionally closed the ritual circle. Pepe was rarefied, reclaimed as a symbol of personal redemption and transmutation. In esoteric terms, the creator redeemed his golem, mirroring the hermetic ideal. The magus must reabsorb the force he has unleashed upon the world. In short, Pepe the Frog is a living allegory of the digitalian. The frog-headed Keck reborn in the circuitry of the internet. He represents chaos, transmutation, and the power of collective imagination to summon gods out of memes. He is the spirit of the liminal web croaking from the depths of cyberspace. He's the feels-good man. The chaotic amphibious current of Keck is not the final destination. It is the divine demolition, the necessary unraveling of a godless technocratic Babylon to make way for a new God-first world order. And the ultimate destiny of Pepe then is not to remain an Egyptian chaos god, but to be transformed. We've already seen the iconography shift. Pepe the monk, Pepe the crusader, Pepe nailing at the cross. This is the true alchemy, the transformation of the pagan symbols into the philosopher king. The frog is not the king. It is the fool who paves the way for the true king. And in the digital ether, the great meme war rages on. We are anonymous. We are legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us.